What would you do differently? Not what did you mess up? Seriously, some of the best lessons I've learned and other people have learned come from answering this often overlooked question. We're going to explain why, we're going to give you some examples, and even 2 tips for how to put it into use today and every day on today's Antidote.
Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Hey, Tom, see the bigger camera? The camera gives me more space to do.
Gyrate all over the place. I like it.
That's it. Gyrate all over the place. Perfect.
So for those of you on the podcast, Bob has a new camera today that he is sharing that gives him a wider view. Fascinating that it's a wider view and yet the screen size is the same. Interesting. Anyhow, welcome everyone.
87 degrees, I'm told. The prior camera was 57 degrees.
Fair enough. For all of you who know anything about cameras, where's Mike Kittner when we need him? Mike is a big camera guy. He would know and understand all the difference of this. So welcome everyone to today's Antidote, our daily broadcast and podcast. Sorry that we're a little bit late in trying to create a nice little graphic for St. Patrick's Day. I messed the graphic up and had to go back and do it differently this time. We're going to talk a lot about doing things differently. And really some of the ways that people look at that question, one of the important questions around lessons learned. And as you mentioned sort of in the opening, they sometimes use it as a judgment rather than as an opportunity to learn about thinking and doing things differently. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do that, though, we start off with our celebrations. Bob, what are you celebrating today?
Got a lot going on today. It's St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day. It's also the first day of the big NCAA basketball tournament. I don't think I can call it by its name, but I can say that it happens in March, and there's often a lot of madness surrounding it. That kicks off around noon today, and I've actually worked my schedule out today and tomorrow so I can watch the bulk of it, which is one of my guilty pleasures. I really enjoy it. It's been a habit for a number of years, and it's sort of a reward for all the hard days of work. So how about you? What are you celebrating?
So I'm celebrating that last night I had a lacrosse game. As some people know, I'm a lacrosse official. And I got to do the game with my mentor and my mentor's mentor.
Wow.
So it was a fascinating set of circumstances to go through. It was a little daunting at the start, and then it was fun. And just had to to get through the opening, feeling a little under the microscope, and then like, why would I do that? Just go and do what I need to do. So I'm celebrating the fact.
Did they critique you helpfully?
They gave some tips throughout, which was helpful, and it allowed me at the end of the game to go back and ask the 3 questions that we always ask, the ones that we asked on Tuesday and Wednesday, and that we will talk about today. So that's my celebration. So
I like it. That's great. That's exciting. Are you ready for a quote from this great book I've been reading, The Renegade Way?
I am. Let's hear that quote.
A successful business is one that sells a product or service that someone else values enough to exchange hard-earned money for. Simplified, if you can sell something people will pay for, then you are moving towards success. If you can't, well, you really don't have a business.
Interesting.
And I would apply that to a nonprofit as well. If you can't generate the revenue that you need to operate, then you really don't have a successful nonprofit. I know you're in that space a lot more than I am, but one of the things I think happens from time to time is people talk about, well, I'm trying to do this great stuff, and there's got to be an operational budget usually that covers those costs. And yes, people donate money and that's great, but there's got to be we spent $10,000 and we generated $10,000, whether it's from the person who started it, giving their hard-earned money, or from donors or from grants or any of those equations. There is a financial component of that.
There's a component of it. It's interesting. I think this might be one of the challenges that nonprofits face. I think that they may define success in the way that the number of people, if they serve people, or the impact that they make. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, they clearly can have a larger impact with more resources. And yeah, they still can sometimes have an impact without all the resources they need. So I think it's clearly how you define success, correct?
Yeah, maybe
and
that's
if we are renegades.
Maybe that's our week next week.
How do you define success?
Defining success. I like that.
Interesting. We'll have to ponder that as we think.
All right. Well, let's get to today's topic, Tom, because this is one that I think you and I introduced a lot of people to, and it takes them a minute to get here. But once they get to it, I see a shift.
Okay. Dive in. You're ready to go.
Okay. And I guess the question we're raising is, and I totally blanked on what.
So the topic of the week, you turn this over. I turned this over to Bob.
Because it's our second anniversary Saturday of doing the program, and we've learned some things over the 2 years. But there are 3 questions we ask. And we went through the first question Tuesday, the second question Wednesday, and the third of the 3 we brought up today. And because I'm a knucklehead, I cannot remember exactly what the question is. And I've looked at the slide and I can't find it right now. And it's driving me crazy. Is it?
You want me to ask you what the first 2 are, or should I just share them? So the first question we ask is what went well?
What went well?
And we talked about that on Tuesday.
What didn't go as planned? This is the second one.
What didn't go as planned is the second one. Both great episodes. Because I think sometimes
the third one is what would you do differently, right?
What would you do differently?
There it is. I don't know why that was not coming to me so quickly.
Fair enough. You can ask that question after the show.
Write down the question. That would be what I'd do differently.
So I think that's, it's an interesting, here's the thing that I was thinking about. So I'll let you ponder for a second while I share this. I think a lot of people ask the question, what would I have done differently?
Past tense.
Which
is I should have.
Correct. It's a judgment on
or I
the
could
results
have.
You had. Correct.
I could have written these 3 questions down and had them on a note next to my computer for the week.
Correct. And all that does is you beat yourself up for why didn't I do that? Why wasn't I aware of that? Blah, 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 blah. Too much. So our question is, what would we do differently? Which is future tense. It's really thinking about, okay, whatever is in the past is in the past. Now here's your opportunity to think about if I was doing it again. And so often some of the actions that we take, we do them again, even though they are different. We have the opportunity, because some of the things have a lot of similarity, we can find ways to do it differently. And so I think that's a key component of this question, is not using it as a judgment on what has happened, rather using it as an opportunity to look forward as you think about what the next time that you are doing something like this.
I would add 2 thoughts to that. One, I think it helps us synthesize the first 2 questions into actionable steps. What went well? What didn't go as planned? Now we're at the point where, okay, what would you do differently? If you've gone through those first 2, I find the logical third step is, okay, wow, that went exactly as I planned. I need to do more of that. That didn't really go the way I thought. Good or bad, doesn't matter. Happy, sad, doesn't matter. Wow, now that I've got these things, I can assess and say, okay, if I were to do something like this again, here are the things that I would apply to it. And it's new knowledge and experience and perspective coming into play. It's just most of us, I think, are reluctant to do that. We're too busy beating ourselves up. The other piece of it that I really like is doing it differently really opens, I find for me, it opens my mind to additional possibilities, to push things a little further. Hey, I did this activity in this workshop. It went really well. I could probably take that and do that a different way that's even more impactful to people. That's what I find. And it's with presentations, I really like those 3 questions. And the third question is gold. I also find with most of my clients, that third question is one that they're like, I can't think of anything. I'm just happy it's over, or I never want to do it again. And it's like, well, let's go through it. And often after they answer that third question, that's when they'll say to themselves, it really wasn't that bad. I guess I really could do this again. And again, this is all at its core, we're playing mind games. We're rewarding ourselves for doing something new. And we're saying, okay, you took this step, whatever that step was, good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. You and I are of the school of thought, you mostly, but me more and more, that we're not going to judge the results. And so if that's the case, then it's how can we apply this going forward? And I think when I look at my success in the last couple of years has come greatly from my ability to pivot from what I did to what I could do. It's like, well, if this worked for this, that could work there. Oh, wow, this marketing campaign really resonates with these people. I wonder if it would resonate with this group. Or this word, I say this word and people really respond. Like, oh, tell me more. Wow, I need to find some other words. Where did I find that word? And I think it really opens our eyes to possibilities, which is, to me, ultimately, when you're carving your own path, it's about the possibilities. It's not about what did I screw up, what did I do right. It's about what can I do today, what can I do tomorrow to help me get where I'm going. And I think this question, more than any, really helps us define where that next step could be.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I think about this show and I think about, okay, what would I do differently? And, the question again, and why it's not a judgment, is because we only know what we know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And until we have done it, we don't have any results to consider it by. I know one of the big questions we had when we started this was, how would we offer it? And would it be free? Would it be something that we would charge? That was definitely something we talked about within the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. And, I think
something you and I have continued to talk about.
Correct.
At least once every month or two, even
Correct.
This week.
Well, and I think that it's one of the questions was at the time, because we didn't know the answer to this question, was, would there be enough value that people would find interest? And at the time, given what we knew, we decided that we weren't certain. And so the decision we made, which could be easy for us to go back and say, well, now we've got 1,200 people in this group. What if we had charged from the beginning and all of that? And I think that what we have developed and learned is that there is value and that there are people who find value. And so that there is an opportunity to do it differently moving forward. And knowing that the results may or may not be this, may or may not work. It may just, we'll get whatever the results are, and then we can figure out, okay, and ask ourselves the 3 questions and then continue to move forward. And I think that the same goes for how broadly we put this out. At one point we did talk at one point about, well, let's just do this on YouTube, force everybody to go to YouTube, and then we can drive up views, which means more people will see it, which means there's an opportunity to generate revenue from it if we chose. All those things that we could do differently. And I think that the beauty of that, and I know even for us at times have slipped into that should have done or would have done differently, which was a judgment. And I think we've been able to sort of move off of that as we start to think about, okay, now that we know what we know, that changes what's real for us, changes our knowledge, experience, and perspective, and allows us to choose what we want to do as we continue to move forward, or help someone else who might be considering the same thing. was like, hey, I've got this idea that I want to do, and I want to create a community around it. I want to share messages that we could help them, not give them answers. We could just help them with, here's what we experienced. And we would likely know the right questions to ask them so that they could choose what was going to be in their best interest and based on what is real for them, to help them move forward a little quicker than the challenges, than maybe the speed with which we've moved forward.
We have done some things differently along the way, just, for people who haven't been paying attention for 2 years, and I can understand that you might not have heard about us, but one of the most spectacular things we tried for about 30 days, and it didn't work very well, was we were on Clubhouse. We did a Clubhouse every couple of days. We tried that, and we didn't see the benefits that we were hoping for, so we stopped that. More recently, if you go back, a month, 6-8 weeks, we were talking about having the Renegade calendar the day of the week, and a Renegade would celebrate. We pushed that a bit. It didn't work. We didn't get the response we got, so we pivoted, and now we're reading from the book. So even though if you're someone who's been watching us for a while and you think, wow, these guys really know exactly what they're doing and they have it so lined up and so focused, it's not always the case. And I know of no executive, no CEO, no nonprofit leader, no manager who could literally tell me right now, this is exactly what's going to happen today, and I know how to handle every situation. It just doesn't happen. And in this pandemic affected, supply chain affected, global politics affected world that we're in, it's going to change even more. What's going on, Tom? I see you looking off. Looks like something's going up in the corner.
Oh, good.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
good deal.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, I think our efforts, I think, are a good example of the benefit you can get when you ask these questions, because you're constantly saying you're constantly learning lessons from what you've done. We could spend a lot of time, I'm sure, if we allowed ourselves to go down that rabbit hole of judging all the things that we have done.
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, that's why we're not headed down that pathway. Rather, I think that we try to step and say, okay, this is what we've learned up till now. Now, how does that influence or impact the choices that we are going to make going forward? And I think it allows us to move forward much more quickly than if we started down that rabbit hole. We could be down there a long time. And what good is it going to do? It's not going to change anything that's happened in the past. No. It isn't helping us move forward to see what might go differently in the future. And so I just would encourage people that as you start judging the results you've gotten, it's going to lead you to getting stuck and frustrated and overwhelmed. And likely stopping maybe right before you make that one little tweak that completely changes everything that you have done. And now you're getting the results that you thought you might get. And it's just all because you allowed yourself to keep addressing and learning and then figuring out, okay, what will I do differently in the future?
I think it's so critical. Is that your one thing, Tom?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I think when you talk about getting stuck, this is one of the things I've noticed as we've been doing this, because you go through this with me all the time. It keeps me from being stuck. It keeps me from being really mad at myself about, oh, I should have done this. I messed this up. I see myself moving from frustration to opportunity much more quickly. There's still a momentary like, oh, I wish I'd known that. Oh, why didn't I do that? And you saw it this morning with whatever it was, not having the question and stumbling through that. But I'm quicker to get past it now than I was before. And I think I get stuck less because I can move forward knowing I'm learning something along the way. And I'm trying not to judge the results in the moment, which up until, I don't know, year and a half ago, that was my go-to. It'd be like, it was either a success or a failure. And if it was a success, yay, Bob. If it was a failure, beat myself up for 5 days.
And I think that's the thing, is that it's easy to head down that path. And I think we're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to get results and we're going to have an emotion. It's the difference of whether you allow yourself to stay within whatever that emotion is, or choose to say, okay, I've had my minute of celebration or my minute of frustration. You know, if you get great results, taking time to celebrate that, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of human nature.
We encourage that. That's why
Right.
we celebrate the beginning of each program.
If you live in that celebration, you are likely going to run into obstacles that you weren't thinking about or you didn't imagine. Same
Or
thing
you'll be
with
static, right? You just won't grow.
Well, and I think that
You'll
actually
be doing the same thing you did a year ago or 5 years ago, even though the world around you, as we've learned so much in the last 2 years, is constantly changing.
which means you're not really static. You're falling behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're not changing as everything else is changing. And I think that's the piece that people forget about. They have success or defined failure, and they feel like, oh, okay, well, even though this was a failure, I'm still doing okay, and I'll just continue doing this. And at the same time, while you're moving slowly, the world is moving faster, and so you are truly falling behind the changes around you and not being willing to adjust and adapt to them. And
Right.
so I think that, you know, again, being in that emotion for a moment is fine. And then moving forward, you know, I think the longer or the shorter you stay in that emotion and that you start to think about what's the next step, I think you're going to move closer and closer to your definition of success than if you stay in whatever that emotion is that you have based on the judgment of the results you got.
Right. When someone says, I'll never do that again, that's probably the greatest opportunity to find out what you might do differently if you had to do it again. Even if it went horribly wrong in every regard, there's something you can learn from the experience. You didn't set something up right. You didn't plan right. You didn't go to the right location, whatever it is. There's always an opportunity to grow. And I think that's my one thing. This question really pushes you to think about how you can grow in a very non-judgmental, very matter-of-fact way. And as you get more comfortable asking that question and forcing yourself to answer it, because at the beginning, when I coach people on it, they're like, I can't think of anything I'd do differently. And they're so upset. And it's like, well, what about this? Could you have done this? Oh, yeah, I guess I could. Yeah. Could you have done this? Oh, yeah. Oh, I could probably have done this too. It's like, okay, that's 3 things. Those 3 things can be the catalyst for huge growth. Absolutely. In a way that I can't tell people how much I've grown at times from just that question. Like, of the 3 questions, I like that question the best. The other 2, I think, set the stage for that one. And I find more and more, I kind of shortcut it and just get right to this question almost every time, because I think this is where the meat is for me. I still ask the other 2, but I kind of go through them pretty quickly. This is one where I really spend time. You know, if I'm driving home from a meeting, you know, what went well? Okay. What would I do different? Ooh, write that down on a sheet of paper. You know, capture that, because that could be really helpful. Or I find it also causes me to really think big about things in a way that I hadn't. It's like, oh, wow. What if? Man, I got to talk to Tom. I got this really big idea. That's what's available. And those big ideas, once you start to go through them and break them down, aren't as big. And they came from what you learned from your prior experience. Somewhere there was a one thing.
Somewhere in there. Well, I think that, you know, it's interesting as you were talking through that. I think this balances out the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think without the other 2, I think we always think about these huge opportunities. And sometimes we decide we're just going to throw everything out and start all over again because I could do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes that then doesn't give the credence that it could to what went well and what didn't go as planned. Like, the thing I love about what didn't go as planned is it helps me think about what are those things that I never would have imagined. And I think what sometimes happens is do differently. It's easy to think about all these other things that I could do differently. And I think that is great. And it helps us move forward. There's no doubt about that. I think sometimes we move forward without considering the things that we can't imagine, that could jump into our way. That if we pause to take time, like, I think so I would agree. I think that in some regards, this is the easiest question to answer. And yet I think that if we jump ahead, we miss out on some opportunities and potential obstacles that could be identified that will allow us to make sure we are not just chasing a shiny object, headed down a rabbit hole, all those other sayings that can be so tempting to do. And it allows us to be like, well, wait a minute, these things did go well. Here are some other things that, man, I never could have imagined that the fire alarm was going to go off. And if you're not sure what that is, go back and listen to yesterday's episode. And then this leads into this question. And so my one thing, I'm going to go back to where I started, is that the question is, what would you do differently? Not what would you have done differently? I just think that allows you to move forward, not get stuck looking back on what has happened that you can no longer change or control.
I like that. I like that a lot. Awesome.
All right. So thanks everyone for being with us today. We apologize again at the start of our show. We will consider what we can do differently so that may not happen again in the future. And there's pretty much things that will be out of our control, so it might happen. So I would also suggest, as I mentioned earlier, if you caught this episode but didn't catch the other two, to go back and listen to our discussion around what went well and what didn't go as planned. I think there will be some helpful hints in there that, again, allow you to balance, and why I think these 3 questions are so valuable as you continue to figure out what are the lessons that you learn from the actions that you take. So if you have thoughts you'd like to share, please feel free to put them in the comments. If you have your one thing, we'd love to hear that. Please feel free to put that in the comments. If you happen to be watching this on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or
LinkedIn Live,
we still got it in. If you happen to be listening to the podcast, it's pretty hard to comment, although you can rate our show.
5 stars.
Absolutely. Or you can share it with someone else. So that would be a great way to share. If you have someone who really gets stuck judging the results they get, you might want to share these 3 episodes with them and talk about the value of lessons learned to help them move forward and get out of being stuck. And if you would still like to comment and share your thoughts and ideas because you think you have information that would be valuable, which you do, to others, please come join us in our Ring of Renegades Facebook group, where you can share those thoughts and ideas with our 1,200 members plus, who are all trying to find their next step along their own unique pathway to success. So we look forward to seeing you inside the Ring of Renegades Facebook group, or we'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, for our, I think, favorite show of the week.
Discoveries of the week.
Discoveries of the week every Friday. So we look forward to seeing you then. If not, well, I guess we'll look forward to seeing you inside the Facebook group, or we'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, for our next edition of Today's Antidote. Have a great day and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Hey, embrace the renegading you. It's worth it.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening to Today's Antidote, powered by the Renegade Success Network. The Renegade Success Network helps you confidently create your own unique pathway to success. To learn more about the Renegade Success Network and how you can take your next step, follow us on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, or join the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. For full details on how you can join our community, go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com. Embrace the renegade in you.